An independent evaluation of Snowflake's Cortex Analyst found that 6 in 10 AI-generated queries were wrong, but they all compiled and run without a single error. That's not a model problem. That's a mission harness problem. Today's guest spent the last 6 months building the fix, and it just topped the industry benchmark for agentic data engineering. Welcome to Data Science with Sam. I'm your host, Sam Day. My guest is Pradnesh Patil. Pradnesh Patil is the co-founder and CEO of Ultimate AI, a platform that brings agentic AI to data engineering, helping teams automate Snowflake platform management, optimize warehouse performance, build cross-platform data pipelines, and accelerate workload migration to Snowflake. Ultimate AI's open source tools are used by thousands of data engineers daily, and the platform is trusted by Fortune 500s. Prior to Ultimate AI, Pradnesh spent over a decade in product leadership roles at Palo Alto Networks, Cisco, and VMware, building enterprise data, security, and AI products at scale. Pradnesh, welcome to the show. I'm very happy to have you here and looking forward to our conversation today.
Yes, thanks for having me. Very excited for this conversation. I'm a big fan of your podcast.
Thank you. Now let's start with the beginning, because the insight behind your product, Ultimate Code, is not obvious, and I don't think most people working with AI coding tools have seen it yet. So my first question to you is, you spent years building enterprise products before founding Ultimate. What was the specific moment you realized that AI agents were going to fail in production data environments, and not because the models were bad, but because something structural were missing?
So I have been working in AI for last few years, right? Right from the GPT Neo new models started coming in. At the same time, my co-founder, we realized that AI is going to change multiple industries. And data industry is not going to be an exception to that. And as the more and more innovation started happening on models and in the relevant ecosystem, we started seeing the pattern that continuously models are getting better, but the actual work that people are doing using these models in certain areas, especially in the data space, isn't getting better because, or when you see it, the mileage between different users varies when they use AI. And the reason for that is, have you configured the right things to be used with that AI? Are you feeding in the right information or context to that AI, right? And that entire set of components, what we call as AI harness or agentic harness that as these agents can use, is very important to configure it right. And we saw a huge gap in the space just even because of the knowledge and even because of the tooling available, where we can come in and start building components of that harness as open source solution and as well as some of those as commercial solutions as well. And this is how we started when we saw bunch of people trying to use AI and struggling with it.
No, that's perfectly makes sense to me, because as you mentioned, it's like not defining, like we somehow we miss to define the concept properly, because it's like harness is not a term most people in the data engineering space have heard before, but I think it's the right word for a reason, which kind of like brings me to my next question. Like, whoever listening to this episode, if they're a data engineer or a machine learning practitioner, can you break it down? What is really a harness is? What does it actually do? And why can't a well-written system prompt, become a substitute for harness?
So I think harness is a term that is just not limited to the data space. And I think I understand it conceptually, but I'm not sure if I can do a formal definition of it. But let me try it. Okay. So harness is a set of components for a particular space to make the AI agents work right. For example, for the data space itself, you need to feed in a lot of contextual information, right? You need to feed in lineage information. What are the schemas of the tables? Hey, I ran a query. What is the result of that in the query profile or query plan, right? That information you need to feed in to AI to do the work for you, whether it's optimizing the query or whether it's building a data pipeline. Okay, so that's one part that becomes part of the harness. Second part, when it comes to data space, governance part of it. You can't have every agent accessing every type of sensitive data. Or, crowd's favorite, you can't have an agent run $3,000 worth of query, because if you let it, it's going to run at one point or another a query that's going to cost you thousands of dollars. So in the data space, that governance angle is very, very important, right? And not just the data space. I think if you look at other areas like finance, etc., the governance angle is very important. So even when it comes to building harness for data work, that governance angle is very important. Now, other couple of pieces are very common. For example, people use bunch of MCP servers or tools with the AI. That becomes part of your data engineering harness also. So, for example, for data engineering harness, you're going to need a MCP server for some SQL tools. Or if you use, say, something like Databricks or Snowflake, you should use that MCP server also. That becomes part of it. Then other piece is the fourth piece is the skills. Day to day, you're doing some specific data work, like maybe debugging data pipelines, or your job is more of optimizing data workloads, or more on the data science side, building some prediction models, etc. And then what people do is they actually write the skills for specific workflows they do. But imagine a repository of skills that is always available for you. So it's like a shared knowledge that I don't have to build skills for everything I do. I can just pull from that repository. So that repository becomes part of that harness as well. And last but not the least, I think some innovation has started happening in that area as well, is the infrastructure component of it. For example, we always had these development environments for engineers, right? Before pushing the code into production, test it out in development environment. Now agent is doing data work for you. Should they just blindly push that work into production? Of course not. They should test it out in a development environment. And unlike humans, we're going to have even 10x, 100x more agents that are going to get spawned and they're going to do all that work. Now, for that, creating, for example, sandboxes for those agents, easy validation mechanisms, that starts falling more under that infrastructure component of the harness also. So these five components, if I may summarize: context, governance, your MCPs and tools, your skills, and then fifth component, the infrastructure. I think especially in the data space, in my view, those form up that harness, agentic harness for the data work.
Thanks, Pradnesh. The analogy which I kind of try to draw here right now is that a system prompt is like tells the model what to do, but a harness tells it what is actually true. Like you said, mentioned that the shared knowledge, the context is kind of draws from there. And that's why it's so important to have that harness to make sure that you are instructing your way to the ground truth. So thank you, Pradnesh. It's definitely very informative, and I hope my listeners over here from the data engineering or data science, even machine learning fields, would draw more kind of information of that, and they would basically use the product that's gonna build their data harness rather than just driving some system prompt engineering. Now, to that perspective, I would like to move on to the next question. And this is something that I was doing some research on your product and I came across this information is that your team published striking statistics, such as 27 to 33% of AI generated SQL references tables that don't exist. And 78% of errors are silent wrong join queries that compile, run, and return confidently wrong data without triggering any alert. So, if I think from a data quality perspective, where do these numbers come from, and what do they tell us about the nature of the failure that your product or your team are kind of like flagged?
So, the hallucination is a very classic problem with the agents, right? They think, hey,
Right.
this table exists. Let me try to query that table, end up writing wrong queries. Or sometimes only pulls the data from certain subsets and presents to you as a very strongly that, hey, this is right. And it's not LLM's fault. It's because I think as a humans, we are not feeding in the right information, as I was telling you, or we are not giving the right guidelines also, right? So first part is feeding in the right information, like all that context, that what tables exactly actually exist in Snowflake. There is a way, or Databricks, there is a way should be to feed in that information, and not just which tables exist, how they are connected between each other. So the lineage information that needs to be fed also. Now the second part of it is, okay, I ran the query or I'm trying to do something, There needs to be a way to validate this, whether I did the right work as an agent, right? So that validation layer is very important also. Now, when it comes to the sources of this information, there are tons and tons of stories that are out there. And through our product, there are thousands of people who use it. We have more than million downloads of our free open source project. And that's where collectively also we have seen that information that across the board, these things are happening, at a crazy volume. And a lot of people are struggling through it individually. And that's why we decided to build this Ultimate Code open source project. So, Sam, you might have checked it out already, but just for the audiences here, if you just search for Ultimate, we spell it with Altimate hyphen code. Just look for the GitHub repository. You can just install it with npm package. And all of these things, like providing right context to these agents or giving a validation layer, we have tried our best to solve those problems through that open source project.
Thank you. Thanks, Pradnesh. And for my listeners who would like to take a look at the Ultimate Code GitHub repository, please take a look at the show notes. I dropped the GitHub repository location there. Now, moving on to that, since we're talking about Ultimate Code, I was just kind of like came across this news that Ultimate Code already topped ADE-Bench, the industry benchmark for agentic data engineering created by Ben Stansel and DBT Labs. So congratulations, Pradnesh, for that landmark.
Thank you.
So just wanted to understand that tell us something about the success story that Ultimate Code already like received. Like how many users already downloaded that? What kind of like a benchmark that your team tracking? Just give us like some overview of that, which you can share with the in the public forum.
Yeah, absolutely. So our open source products, as I was telling you earlier, have been downloaded more than million times, get used in 200 plus countries, thousands and thousands of users. But the interesting thing is, I think where these benchmarks are useful in trying to sort of compare across different harnesses and different tools, which ones are really sort of pushing the envelope. And overall, collectively, also as a tool landscape, are we getting better and better? Like where the benchmarks were 6 months ago, are we actually better? And as a collectively, as an industry, we are doing better job at it. So ADE benchmark is Agentic Data Engineering Benchmark, which is a series of tasks that I think Best Ansel DBT Labs they put together, where you can compare your harness with some other models and see how the results come out. And the interesting thing, we topped the benchmark, but even more interesting than that, what we saw was we actually topped the benchmark using Sonnet compared to some of the other tools using Opus, etc. And this is actually the very hard proof of us on our viewpoint that nowadays it's not just about the model. It's about the harness or the information that you feed to that model. It will make that model do the better job because of it. So on agentic data engineering benchmark ADE, we are doing super amazing. There is another benchmark DAB, data agent, I think data agent benchmark done by people at University of Berkeley. That benchmark also we topped, and it's the same setup. I think sort of a format where there are different tasks. You hook up your harness and see how well your agents behave against those tasks as well.
Thanks, Pradnesh. Those are like really good informations, and especially I would encourage my listeners to take a look at Ultimate Code, and especially if you are kind of like testing or doing R&D on a lot of agentic data engineering platforms, Ultimate Code would one of the toolkits for you to research for sure. So now, since we are kind of like just talked about the product, I would like to go a little bit of deep dive into like a core design principles of your, is this some sort of like a LLM reasons or compile engines validation? Like why do you draw the line between what belongs in the LLM's reasoning loop versus what needs to be handled deterministically outside it? Like you mentioned that Sonnet kind of like provided a great performance and it kind of surpassed the benchmark testing. So you did not actually have to go use the most sophisticated model like Opus right now, and Sonnet was great, good enough, right? So how you kind of like balance it out, like okay, this amount of harness or context would be good enough for Sonnet to give you the result that's going to topple the benchmark performance.
That's actually I think Very interesting thought because what has happened in last couple of years is since LLMs AI is so hot, a lot of people look at it as a big hammer. And when you have a big hammer, everything else starts looking to you as a nail that you just
Yeah.
want to, smash in. But for a lot of things, for example, like validation, you just need a standard logic. You don't need probabilistic logic that LLM provides you, right? For example, is this query producing right data? It's a very simple formulatic deterministic question. You shouldn't be applying LLM for that, right? And a lot of times, if you use a wrong tool for the wrong job, it's going to give you, it increases your risk of getting wrong results as well. So if the task is deterministic, I just want to validate whether this query is producing right data. You just use a deterministic tool. You shouldn't just
Cool.
blindly
Or machine
send it to
learning. Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
exactly. So a lot of things like this we have taken care of in our harness itself, so that right things get routed to the deterministic layer. Or even when LLM does the job, like for example, writing a code for a data pipeline. But ultimately, even from data pipeline, you're expecting certain data results. A human or a machine should go and validate whether it's producing the expected data result. That's a deterministic job. So that's where we again use harness tools and components instead of just routing it through the LLM. So in that way, it's happening a lot better. Some of the other areas where we have done innovation is around, for example, context compaction. So if you have a long running task, of course, whether it's Claude Code, whether it's Cursor, or depending on which LLM you're using, it's going to compact your context. Now, if your LLM is not aware of the task you are doing, like it's a data engineering job or data science job, it's going to compact the context, which it shouldn't do. Like, for example, in the data engineering world, it will try to compact the schema information or lineage information. And that's a recipe for disaster because if the schema information gets compacted, your rest of the task after that are going to fail because the schema information is not complete. So then we did a bunch of innovation around context compaction. So specifically for data tasks, we are not compacting the things which might be important in the follow-on steps, and we can do it much better. So now that's the reason for longer tasks, then you are going to do much better against those benchmarks, etc. So things like this, and there are few more, but I highly encourage audience like go check out the GitHub repo. All the code is there. We have listed down the things we are doing there. I'm sure even technological perspective, you will really enjoy reading about those there.
No, I really like the way you actually started addressing this question, especially the nail and hammer analogy, which I also used it multiple times, especially to kind of draw the comparison between there was a world before LLM came through that, the world like a few years back. And there are so many things that we could have done easily with the deterministic machine learning or even script driven processes, right? So it's great to know that Ultimate kind of like, is having that blend of deterministic check as well as the integrating the power of LLM to give us a better product. And I think that's the future that especially at least for the data engineering and data quality related assessment where you don't need LLM in all the cases, but LLM would be great for
Exactly.
summarizing the data or even like finding the pattern or recognition and all kind of stuff. But if it is just a simple SQL scripting process and stuff, I think the traditional deterministic check and controls would be more than sufficient. So it's great to know that the ultimate kind of like maintaining the balance between a deterministic check and also just using LLM what it's supposed to be doing.
Yeah,
So thanks,
absolutely.
Pradnesh. Yeah. Yeah. Anything else that you want to add to that before I jump on to the next question?
No, not really. I think we covered pretty good ground there.
Cool. Now, since we're talking about data, so of course, it comes down to governance and a lot of failures and stuff. So that brings me to my next question about from the AI failure standpoint. I came across this thing that one team got a $5,000 bill from a single Cortex AI query that their resource monitors never caught. And we all kind of like think, we know the term token maxing is becoming very popular right now, and the enterprise are kind of doubling down on that. So, from your perspective, how does the harness approach that your tool is kind of like taking that address cost controls, permission enforcement, and the kind of failure that don't throw errors or they just quietly produce wrong answers? Like, how it's kind of like, varies making sure the governance aspect of it kind of like maintained, as well as it's not gonna overburden the users with a lot of token cost and stuff.
Yeah, and when we talk about governance, right, there is a cost angle to it, there is a permissions angle to it, like sensitive data, etc. And how can I say this? We always struggled with this challenge as humans, right?
Mhm.
Every tool has its own RBAC model, access policies, etc. But as humans, we always struggle with there is a no combined layer that cuts across the tools and gives us a singular governance layer. Now that problem is 10xing because of the agents. Now we are sending agents talking with all these tools and doing tasks for us, right? And a lot of times as a humans, we have this, what we call as a common sense compass, right? Hey, I shouldn't be going and running $3,000 query. Like naturally, engineers will stop, but agents, it's a machine, it's a piece of code that's running these things. Now you need to tell it explicitly. Hey, don't go crazy, go do crazy things where your query is running for 10 hours or costing people $5,000. And not picking on Snowflake or anybody else here. It's just a if you don't give right guidelines to agent, it's going to do crazy things, right? Because it will think that it's completely normal to go and do it. So when it comes to cost controls in our harness itself, we have built rules and permissions based model where there are already existing guardrails around this that of course the users can configure more, add more guardrails or configure existing guardrails around cost, around governance, around PII information, what agents can access and what they cannot. And the beauty of this is since agents are sitting outside of these tools, we can build a layer that can act as a sort of a layer above existing governance framework that a lot of these different tools also have, right? But whether this pipelining tools, warehousing tools, or BI tools also, and interface with those layers to set up a right sort of a glue layer that works across all these tools. And that's what we have done in the Ultimate Code open source harness that we have built, and it's extendable because every enterprise has their own governance requirements. They want to put their own rules and permissions and guardrails. So then the beauty of the open source comes into a picture. Feel free to extend it further and configure it in a way that you want to do it.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I think that's the true essence of open source, right? It can be customizable, it can be scalable, or
Yeah.
it can fit into any AI governance or compliance category for a specific organization. And that's the world we live in, and we will continue to see more kind of like open source applications kind of getting into mainstream. So thanks, Pradnesh. My last question, last but not least, is a little bit of futuristic. So the promise of agentic data engineering is that the AI agents will handle the heavy lifting, whether running a SQL query or joining multiple tables and giving the answers back to the user. But based on what you have seen in production, what's the realistic picture? Will data engineers stop writing SQL and DBT models, or does the harness model suggest a different future where the human role shifts rather than disappears? Like we will still keep human in the loop, but they're going to more on researching the queries and stuff running on the back end rather than writing the code by themselves.
So here is my viewpoint. Let me give you a viewpoint on what's going to happen in the immediate future and where we are right now also. So first
Hmm.
and foremost, I think the days of writing code by hand are over. Not just for data engineering, even for software engineers also. I think bunch of people in the industry are saying the same thing. Like if you ask about, I think there have been some articles from people at Spotify, even the Anthropic folks are saying that we stopped writing code like almost 6 months ago,
Yep.
where what they're doing is they're just giving instructions to the agents to write code for them. I believe the same thing is happening and it's going to happen more in the data space also. So the days of writing code by hand or building pipelines by hand are getting over fast. Now the challenge is every space comes with its uniqueness. Software engineering is a bit different. You have your requirement document and you don't have to too much worry about the data. Like you have to worry much more about the business logic and other microservices and pieces. Versus on the data side of the things, with a data engineer or data scientist, we have to worry much more about the data. So there are specific
That's true.
things that are needed to make that work on the data side of the things. Now, to move as fast as possible, I think as an industry, those components need to be catered right as a solution. And that's why the harness, and it's not just us, other companies in the space also are building these things out, that how we can enable data engineers and data scientists to have sort of army of agents which is doing work for them, right? And do it at a tremendous speed. So what we are saying is, I think across the board, the amount of work that overall company can produce on the technology side is growing very fast. Like if you try to compare, say for example, the number of features that a particular company that put out last year and how much they have put it this year, you will see that actually a lot of companies within half a year, the amount of functionality that they have put out is same as what they have put out in the entire last year. And the same thing we are seeing that is happening in the data space also. Lot of data work is happening. Like for a long time, there used to be this huge backlog. Hey, if you need a model or if you need a dashboard, come back after 3 months, 6 months, right? Because
That's
our
true.
teams are busy. That backlog is shrinking very rapidly. And from my perspective, what I'm seeing is there are companies which are adopting to this new world very, very rapidly. And there are companies which are moving a bit slower. So I think collectively together, we need to think about how we can help move everybody really fast in this direction. And when I say everybody, it's not just at the company level. Even within the teams, I'm seeing like few people are really pro AI, get their knowledge very fast, and then they're moving very fast, versus some of the other team members are still trying to figure out how I should do it. Is this the right way? Is this not? So, what is that standard path where everybody can just get on and start running faster and faster? So,
Yeah,
and I think it's collectively all of us we need to work on this to make the pace of innovation faster, right?
that's
Now,
true. Yeah.
sometimes people ask these questions: as humans, will humans be still doing this work, etc.? I think what is going to happen is I always draw an analogy with what happened with the industrial revolution, right? Because we got machines at that time. For example, we started making clothes for us. Before that, we used to make clothes by hand. I think
Mhm.
something similar, and I don't have a crystal ball, but I think something similar that's going to happen where in the form of these agents, all of us in different industries, we are going to have these machines which are going to increase the throughput of that particular row 10x, 20x, 100x. At the same time, yes, some roles will get eliminated, but at the same time, it will produce newer roles also.
Yep.
And we'll find, all of us will find our spots in this new world at the right location.
Yeah. No, definitely. Totally agree with you. Like, we are literally going through the transition right now. And as you mentioned that,
Yeah.
we are in the middle of the real fifth industrial revolution at this moment. And AI literally just augmenting like more work for, I mean, of course, augmenting our human intelligence. And I haven't seen anyone told me that they're working less after started utilizing AI. I mean, of course, we're working more. I mean, like they can resonate with that, as you mentioned, that it's gonna make us 10x, 20x productive, and which something would used to take us months or weeks to even build proof of concept. We can even achieve that within a few days now using AI. So I think that's where we are going to see more acceleration. Like the proof of concept is something that can be done very quickly right now. And then, of course, we can think about productionize it later, but at least we can bring something to the table for any organization, whether to an executives or anyone. That process can be done super fast now, and that's just was not possible without AI for sure. Uh, so yeah, I mean, so Pradnesh, before we wrap up this episode, and it's been a great. I think it's a very honest conversation, very real conversation, especially people for the in the data engineering, data science, or machine learning field would definitely drew a lot of inspiration from your journey, especially. Do you want to share anything, any last words about your product or anything to a budding entrepreneur like like you went through that process of building that product? So any tips for them that you want to share, or anything as such from your journey without Ultimate that you want to share with the the listeners, just as a final notes or final thoughts of this episode?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I touched on this a little bit during our conversation.
Mhm.
The important piece is I think taking the industry overall forward. and how we can contribute to that innovation in our own way, right? And when it comes to that, it's all about whatever innovation we do, how it can work across the different components of the space or different tools. For example, if you're building AI layer, like how we do it, how it should work with data pipelines, data warehouses, even the components like BI layer, so that it's taking every component forward at the same time. It's not siloed into individual tool or vendor. Because what I have seen is a lot of times people build AI features for just one product and then it gets siloed and then you don't know what else is happening. So as we are doing all the innovation, we need to think about that. And second part is trying to do it in an open and public way. So wherever possible, always rely as much as possible on open source, where you can build your own community, your tribe, which will help you take things forward, your ideas and your vision also. So if nothing else, I think I would encourage everybody to start going more in the direction of open source and cross platform. Even when you build some interesting project, as long as your company allows it, and if you think other people outside of your company can benefit from it, just open source it. You know, who knows, it might become like a really large project that can help thousands and thousands of people.
Thanks, Pradnesh. And if any of my listener would like to get in touch with you to continue this conversation or wants to know more about Ultimate product, how do they find you?
I would say, in the spirit of open source, we are very active on GitHub repo, and we also have a Slack community around it. I'm very active in the community. So try out the project, create an issue, and if you want to just chat, share your feedback, we have a link on the repo itself for the Slack community. Just be part of the Slack community and feel free to DM me directly there. I'm happy to answer any questions or share more information.
Thank you. And on behalf of all my listeners, I would like to thank you one more time for sharing your thoughts and especially sharing a great product about to the community. I would love to try out Ultimate as we all kind of like taking our journey in the data engineering field utilizing AI. So if this is the conversation you all needed, so I'm Sam Day. Please subscribe to my channel on YouTube, Podbean, Spotify, Apple Podcast, or even iHeartRadio. And I will definitely see you in the next one. And if you know anyone who would like to share their thoughts and also talk about their AI journey on the podcast platform, please feel free to contact Data Science with Sam team. Thank you. Thanks, Pradnesh.
Thank you, Sam.